Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that you hit the nail on the head. That's why we exist, is
Hmm.
we want to be collaborative, integrated. Like I actually initially called our model integrated legal counsel because I wanted to convey that we are your legal counsel. We're integrated with your team. We're on your leadership team. I'm not sure that's as catchy as
Yeah.
fractional, given the
Yeah.
broader, use of fractional today that's just blown up over the last couple of years.
Sure.
So we've switched over to fractional legal team, but really it's to be integrated and proactive.
So anyone who has run a business understands that it's only a matter of time before you have to deal with legal issues. And today we're going to look at some of the big legal hurdles that growing B2B companies face and some solutions to combat them. So my guest is Jeff Holman, founder and CEO of Intellectual Strategies. Welcome to the show, Jeff.
It's my pleasure to be here, Lee. Thanks so much.
So, as I do with most of my guests, why don't you give us a little background on who you are and your company and kind of what you guys do?
Yeah, I'd love to. So, I am not your traditional attorney, unfortunately, or fortunately. I'm not sure which. Maybe depends on perspective.
Yes.
So, I have a background that started in electrical engineering, and it's maybe weird because when I went into engineering, people would be like, "Well, what do you want to do?" And I'm like, "Well, I don't want to be an engineer. I just want the background so I can maybe go into business someday."
Yeah.
And they'd be like, "Okay, whatever." So I actually applied to a bunch of really nice business schools right out of engineering school, and they all told me no. They said, go get some experience.
Huh.
When I went to go get experience, I was like, okay, 3 or 4 years, I'll come back, I'll reapply. I really wanted to go to these big, nice schools. And a couple years into that, somebody said, hey, have you thought about law school? You should become a patent attorney. They love, engineers, and there's
Yeah.
at the time a lot of hiring. And that just derailed my great plans to go to a really nice business school. But it's been 20-ish years having done that, and it's been fantastic. I work with, my career has kind of taken this broad arc from, really niche patents, working with great companies like IBM and Intel and a bunch of Silicon Valley companies, to coming around and saying, well, I really love startups. And so I work exclusively with startups. I've gone in-house with startups, meaning I've, taken myself and my employment and become an employee there. And that led me to seeing how to really work well with small businesses, and which kind of reignited what maybe was this faltering flame for running my own business, right?
Yeah.
It's tough. There's a lot of ups and downs, and sometimes you're like, maybe I'll try something else. So I was on that kind of alternate path at one point,
Yeah.
and I said, oh man, I've been doing it wrong. But I learned that experience really taught me how I think that attorneys should be working with clients, and it's not the way that they teach you in the law firms. You get
Sure.
out and you start billing anyway.
Yeah. You
So
build a
that's
book of
led me to
business.
where we're at today,
Yeah. Go
and
for
and the
partner.
way that we practice and everything. So
Yeah. Cool. That's awesome. I mean, that's such an interesting way to get where you're at, and nice to know too, because I think a lot of business owners would resonate with a similar sentiment that I have, and that is, you don't really want to be, close to attorneys unless you have to be. There's just a lot of bad blood, I think, out there. But knowing that you came from an engineering background and you had a business mind is that's a little bit different conversation. So I think a lot of people can appreciate that.
I should
Um,
share that more because I get a lot
you
of
should.
I get a lot of shifting eyes when I'm an attorney. I'm like, oh, okay,
Yeah, you
no,
you should. I think some messaging there would be good. Engineer turned attorney, something like that. They'd be like, oh, maybe he's on our
I
side.
am your friend.
Yes. So now
Yeah.
you guys have like a fractional legal service. Tell me, how is that the same or different than other fractional experts that might come in?
Okay, yeah. So in a lot of ways, we're really similar to other fractional experts. So if we're talking fractional CFO, fractional CMO, fractional CEO, like whatever it is, right? They come in on a part-time basis, often dedicating some amount of their time, weekly or monthly, to helping fill that role. You're usually at a strategic level. We're really similar in some ways, right? In the legal field, just for context, there's a lot, you're either typically you're either in-house counsel, meaning you're an employee
Hmm.
at full-time, or you're outside counsel. And this is working with businesses, right? But you're at
Yeah.
a law firm and you're there all the time. I sit in the middle, and some people in law firms will take on this role. It's kind of the closest thing in law to a fractional CFO or a fractional CFO. And they would call it outside general counsel. So these attorneys would work closely with a company,
Mm-hmm.
and the company might say, well, we want to just have you we'll pay you a retainer every month. So you're just
Mm-hmm.
always available and ready to help us, and you don't bill us for every single phone call or whatever, right? So outside general counsel. So we kind of took that concept, and when I transitioned from in-house counsel back into doing my own practice, the company I'd been with wanted me to continue on for a time. They moved from Utah, where I'm at, to a different state, and they said, "Well, stay with us, help us find the next person to take this role in house." And I said, "That's fine." What I thought would be a 2 or 3 month, stint with this company turned into a year and a half, because
Gotcha.
it just took a while to find somebody, or,
Yeah.
or whatever, right? But so I ended up falling into this hybrid. Okay, I'm running my own firm. I'm now kind of your outside general counsel, and it works well. So that was a lot like what you might think of with a fractional CFO.
Gotcha. Yeah.
That's great. The next evolution, though, is to turn that into a team.
Right.
And so that's really where we're different, right? So if you look at, and I'll just use lawyers as an example, in the law, if you go, a lot of people will say, well, I'm kind of in between jobs, or I'm not sure what I want to do next. And they'll just kind of adopt this. Well, I'll just be a fractional general counsel for a bit.
Mm-hmm.
And it's really easy to pick up clients sometimes, right? If
Mm-hmm.
you're just kind of, oh, whoever comes, they like, you've worked with people and they're like, well, I really want you. I'll pay you for 5 hours a week or 10 hours a week
Yeah.
or whatever it might be.
Right.
What happens though is, and I see this a lot of, it's just kind of this cycle, is attorneys, because of their nature, perhaps, they're like, I'll do that, I'll do that, I'll do that, I'll do that. And all of a sudden, 9 months in, they're like, I don't know that I like this. Like, I'm working just as much as I was before,
Yeah.
but now I'm the only guy. Like, I carry all the weight for 10 different companies,
Yeah.
and I'm just a big bottleneck for everybody,
And you're
right?
probably trying to
And
answer a
so I
question.
looked at that and I'm like, I don't want that. I want to have a process where we actually are able to scale with the business. We're able to provide the right service at the right time with the right expertise. So it just kind of evolved from maybe going down that path to becoming overwhelmed again, to saying, businesses need more than just my expertise. We need kind of slices of different expertise along the way.
Right. Yeah. Because you're only one person and you can only provide one set of really deep expertise. It's, having a team is going to give you what people really need. Is they need help on this contract, they need help on this legal dispute, they need help on different things. And that one person's probably not going to be able to fulfill all of those at any depth. So a team is very important.
Exactly. You really need experts in the law, and you don't want your non-patent attorney drafting your patents, and likewise, you don't want your patent attorney a lot of times, doing your fundraising documents and
That's
things
right.
like that. And then those of us who kind of been exposed to a bunch of stuff, we call ourselves general counsel.
Yeah.
It's like the general contractor building your house.
Yeah.
They come in, they know enough about the disciplines to hire the right people, manage
Right.
the money going back and forth, manage the relationships, but they're not usually the guy wiring the house, doing the plumbing, laying the floor, and
Yeah.
all that stuff, right?
Yeah. So you're perfect for that sort of startup to second stage growth company where you can provide a lot of impact as they grow rapidly. And then maybe at some point along the line, they may kind of dial that back and bring someone in house.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, we talk to companies all the time, and anywhere from the minute you have an idea and you're like, okay, because of our IP background, we get a lot of idea people, right?
Sure.
Hey, I need a patent, or I'm starting this brand or whatever. So you have that idea. We can help you at a kind of a really small level, maybe even just transactions one at a time, right? Help at that stage. But as you grow that into a business, you maybe raise funds, you start hire employees. We can basically cover and scale with you, to the time that you raise so much money that you get, really fancy VCs that say we need really fancy, expensive attorneys. So
Yeah.
let's go hire somebody at Big Law X, right?
Yeah. Right.
We're really equipped to scale breadth and depth,
Yeah.
throughout a lot of stages early on with companies. So it's
Yeah.
pretty exciting.
Yeah, it is exciting. That's really cool. Okay, so let's jump into the meat of our conversation. We want to talk about some of the big legal hurdles you see with growing B2B companies. I know we mentioned probably two or three specific ones we kind of wanted to dive into. Um, so yeah, let's talk about it. I think this will be very valuable for everyone. What are some of the big legal hurdles you see growing companies facing these days?
Yeah. So I'm gonna present this in kind of my own framework if I can, and
Yeah.
so I like to think of when I was in house, I'm the only attorney, and I'm like, okay, I've got this IP background, patent heavy stuff, but when I first looked at it, I'm like, where do patents and IP show up in a company, right? And I created this map, and I'm like, okay, you got employees, you got vendors, you got customers, you got product, you got board members and corporate
Hmm.
governance. And I mapped it out, and I'm like, IP shows up here, and IP shows up here, and you got contract, right? And I was like, I was kind of a little overwhelmed. I'm like, oh my gosh, IP shows up in like 95% of the places in the business.
Yeah.
Now, sometimes it's just an invention assignment agreement. Other times it's licensing out to people or licensing in from people. But it really shows up everywhere. And so that was the kind of the genesis, if you will, of me starting to think of this in terms of, well, what are the legal playbooks that a company needs?
Hmm.
And those legal playbooks will then oftentimes track with growth milestones in the business. So at a really high level, I would say, a business forms, it needs a business entity.
Hmm.
It and sometimes it brings, the reason it forms can vary. If you're in a professional services business, you just need your first contract so you can, work with customers. If
Right.
you're like an idea or innovative like product company, your first instance is, okay, I need a patent on my new invention.
Yeah.
If you're a marketing company, you might be thinking branding. So there's these big milestones along the way, and so some of the big ones that we might talk about is bringing on employees. That's just an area where there's a whole lot of leverage you can get from getting some really good legal help to onboard employees. Onboarding, offboarding, putting just some template documents in place can save you major headaches down the road, right? So
Yeah.
that's maybe number one. Number two, and we can dive into these in more detail, but kind of
Sure.
as an overview.
Yeah.
Number
Right.
two, when you're innovating, so when you're creating a new product, you're creating a new brand, like you have that spark of genius. Maybe you've hired a dev team, maybe you've hired a tech team, and they're working on building a new world, right? For based around your product or your brand. There's a lot of things you can do up front to protect that new creative idea that you've got.
Hmm.
And it's kind of weird because patents you do it one way, and trademarks, even though they're both intellectual property, you do the opposite way. Patents you want to keep them secret, and trademarks you want to use it in commerce and let
Sure.
people know about it. And so there's, getting some guidance up front there can be really beneficial
Yeah.
to let you know how to do stuff. Um, the other place that we get come in a lot is in fundraising. So people, in small businesses, they're like, okay, I got some friends and family, they want to put money in,
Hmm.
or I've got, maybe a VC on the line, or I've got this angel investor, and I want to
Hmm.
use, what should I use? Should I be using a safe agreement? If you're familiar with those, it's kind of
Hmm.
this really quick and easy template that
Right.
is easy to use and might create problems down the line, but a lot of people use it. Or maybe you want to do what's called a priced round, where you're actually establishing a value of your company and you're telling people they're buying a specific percentage or chunk of your company along the way because their investment is so much money out of the total value of the company.
Right.
So there's price round. So how do you structure that? And then what are all the kind of corporate things, the tasks that go along with that, the documents that need to be created, filed with the state, those types of things. Those are maybe three really big areas: employees, innovation, and funding, where we see a lot of people having
Hmm.
questions and needing guidance around, how to step through or step across those, across those voids that they're not as familiar with.
Yeah, the subtext that I'm hearing from all of this is being proactive, because I think a lot of companies are reactive and they step in a hole, and it's going to happen to everyone. You can't foresee everything. But I think a lot of companies don't try to foresee. They will go out there and do business and kind of have the legal headache later. But I think what you're saying is deploying some of these playbooks is really more of a proactive way about going at it.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that you hit the nail on the head. That's why we exist, is
Mm-hmm.
we want to be collaborative, integrated. Like I actually initially called our model integrated legal counsel, because I wanted to convey that we are your legal counsel. We're integrated with your team. We're on your leadership team. I'm not sure that's as catchy as
Yeah,
fractional, given the
yeah,
broader, use of fractional today that's just blown up over the last couple of years.
sure.
So we've switched over to fractional legal team, but really it's to be integrated and proactive.
Mm-hmm.
And where we see the biggest difference to this point is first time versus second time founders. First time founders, they're enthusiastic, they're exuberant, they're going to change the world, they're moving fast, they're breaking things. They don't know what they don't know,
Mm-hmm.
and they don't have the network around them a lot of times to help keep the guardrails in place, right?
Right.
And so they break things, and they break a lot of things. And
Yeah,
sometimes they break expensive things, and then they come and they're like, after the fact, they're like,
that's right.
hey, these guys are suing us, or this happened, an employee left and said these things, or whatever it is. People complained about our 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 marketing tactics or our
Sure.
refund policy, whatever, right? So
Yeah.
they just don't know what they don't know.
Yeah.
Whereas second time founders, they've been down that road. They've broken big,
Mm-hmm.
expensive things before. And they're like, oh, I didn't realize that I really needed to document putting, you know, bringing on a co-founder,
Mm-hmm.
because if I don't, then we don't have everything in place and the co-founder stops working on the business, has what we call dead equity, that they're like, they own part of the company and they're not even involved in it anymore. And
Yeah.
if it goes big, I mean, great, but when you try to bring an investor in, the investor's like, who's this dude? Why is he on
Yeah.
here? It's going to cost you like $500,000 to buy him out of that piece of equity that he didn't even earn, really, except you
Yeah.
didn't document it and set the rule. You didn't have the guardrails in place.
Sure.
Anyway,
Yeah. No, I mean, to me, that's a huge marker for how valuable your type of service could be, because there's a lot of unknowns to a new founder that you have knowns. So there's a big value transfer right there. But then you're both going to have some unknowns from a legal perspective and from every perspective, because if they're taking a new product to market, there's a lot of unknowns across the board. So having someone on the team to run things by as you are going out into the unknown is going to help mitigate some of those unknowns. And then when you have those maybe last 5-10% that are truly unknown, you can be there to reactively take care of them.
yeah, yeah. There's always some reactivity. I mean,
Sure.
we have clients who get, as soon as you get successful or you appear to be successful, especially in a like a B2C type company,
Mm-hmm.
everybody's like, oh, they're making a lot of money. I
Mm-hmm.
bet we could find some way to sue them.
That's right.
They're violating this state's
Yeah.
really, unique laws about marketing or
Yep.
about funding or
Or I
about
couldn't
whatever,
access my
or
account.
ADA stuff.
Yeah, I couldn't
Yeah.
access my account, so there's lost revenue. There's all kinds of ways that they can pick at it.
Oh yeah, yeah. And so some of that, I mean, it's generally you can expect it will happen, but when and where and who, you don't really know, right?
Right.
Um,
Well, let's jump, since you mentioned IP patents and trademarks. Let's jump into that a little deeper. I suspect IP is building your brand, but then sort of protecting it at the same time. Talk to me about kind of how you guys approach that, and maybe give an example of some of that work.
yeah, I think a good starting point for that conversation is two things. First of all IP is speculative, pretty much, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like you're trying to create something new, and in a lot of instances, you're trying to see if when you do create it, if you can protect it yourself
Mm-hmm.
before you even demonstrated that it has value in the market. you're like, oh, it's a new idea, but I have to put money into protecting it before I tell anybody about it.
Yeah.
It seems backwards. It's speculative though, right?
Sure.
And so keep that in mind. And a lot, it's frustrating because the legal costs can come quicker than the market validation a lot of times.
Yes.
But that's just the way the rules are set up.
Right.
If I could solve that, I would, but I don't know how yet. So
Yeah.
that's one thing.
Yeah. I guess it sort of depends on what it is you're bringing to market. So if you're established or you're an establishing company and you want to bring a new idea, to the mix of other ideas that you already have in the market, again, that's maybe not the best example, but I'm trying to think of an example where it would be, you could really take it to market to some larger degree before you start protecting it and spending money on protecting it. I don't know. Is there an example that you can think of that would make sense to not try to spend money on protecting it before you validate it?
Yes. There are a lot of examples, and maybe it's spending smaller amounts of money up front before you commit bigger amounts of money, right? Because it is speculative.
Yeah.
And so in the trademark world, for example, let's say you and I were starting a new company and we wanted to, I don't know, we found something in China and we wanted to go buy it and put it out on e-commerce, build an e-commerce company out of that. What we could do, we could go out and we could create an entire brand. We could do a bunch of research around the trademarks. We could do a bunch of file for our own protection, and we could put tens of thousands of dollars into the legal side before we even do any selling. Depending on the type of product it is, what you might do is you might buy a much smaller minimum order and test it out first, right? Do a little bit of testing. Say, hey, if we buy 1,000 units of this instead of putting $500,000 into inventory, let's just buy a little bit, put it out there. Let's throw our branding on it and see if it works, right? At that point, because with branding, the real risk is that you go out there and somebody says, oh, you're infringing my brand. And so you want to test that at a really small level. And if you test that with 1,000 units or 100 units or whatever that number is, then you can see more quickly if first of all, the branding that you chose is working for the product that you're trying to sell.
Right.
Then you say, okay, maybe it's working enough. We buy a little bit more. We start making more revenue, and then we allocate some of the money we're actually making instead of the money we had in the bank account. We allocate some of that to go out and really fine tune that brand, right?
Yeah.
So that's maybe staging on the branding side.
Okay. Yeah. And you're obviously the expert on this, not me, but it makes me think that speed is a very critical component too, because if you're running very fast to market and you're getting validation very quickly, then that's going to probably give you an example, or that's probably going to give you an idea of, how much or little you need to protect it as you are moving into the market, through the market with new ideas. What comes to mind is I heard the other day a quote or a clip from Elon Musk talking about how he basically doesn't believe in protecting with patents and everything. And so I'd love to get your take on that, because I think that first of all, he's not the arbiter of truth on all things. Let's make that clear, even though he's got great ideas. But I think that it's not as definitive as that. I don't think it's as absolute across the board. I think there are case in points where we look at Coke. If Coke didn't have their stuff protected for all of these years, they wouldn't be the company they are. So I think when I look at him and his comments, I sort of look at speed. If he's going very, very fast, so for him to sit and try to protect every little thing would probably slow him down and cause him more trouble than it would if he just ran with it. Whereas there's companies that are moving slower that probably need to take the step to protect as they go along. So curious your thoughts on that.
Yeah, there's a whole philosophical conversation to be had around this.
Sure.
We could start talking about how much software engineers and software developers love or mostly hate patents too.
Yeah.
So let me address it this way, and this kind of gets into the second point I was going to bring up anyways. I mentioned, maybe I didn't mention it yet. So I mentioned speculation. The other point is layers. A lot of this stuff happens in layers. So you build IP in layers, whether that's small layers and bigger layers, or whether that's different types of IP, patents, trademarks, trade secrets, copyrights. You build this in layers, right? if you're doing it the right way. And so that helps with the cost, scaling, but it also, these are really layers of resources that fit into your broader business strategy. So when you talk, when you hear Elon Musk say, I don't believe in patents, he doesn't believe in patents for some very specific reasons. And that's because in his strategic business model, he doesn't need patents the same way that a small inventor might need them, or the
Mm-hmm.
same way that a large company might need them in a very patent centric field.
Mm-hmm.
And so he's moving so fast, he's doing things in a certain way. By him, for example, and I forget the year it was, I don't know if it was 2016 or whenever, he said, hey, I'm giving free access to all of my battery patents, right?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if he's done another big move like that since then, but he said,
Mm-hmm.
my battery patents, anybody can use them. Well, yeah, because there's no market. He's going to build his market so much faster
Yeah,
by giving people access to his technology that fits his products,
that's right.
that and he has the resources to look at his patents as an enabling tool
Mm-hmm.
for the rest of his business rather than like
Completely.
the golden egg of his business, right? So
Yes, yes.
it's all about business model. It gets into a broader conversation about business strategy and what are your business objectives?
Mm-hmm.
What kind of leadership position do you want to take in the industry? And what resources do you really have? And how do you use those resources to create that sustainable advantage?
Yeah,
Like Elon Musk is, I think we can all admit,
yeah,
in a different level. He's very, very
yeah.
much multiple levels ahead of all of us in a lot of ways.
Yes,
Now there are times when it makes sense not to spend money on patents, but there are also times when it does make sense to spend money on patents, and
right.
you really have to evaluate that for like your own business. Does it make sense if let's just say your podcasting business as a
Yeah,
business, you probably don't need any patents, right?
right.
But if you're in the automotive industry, you probably are going to be filing utility patents, design
Yeah,
patents, a lot of stuff because that's common in that industry.
that's right.
Unless you're Elon Musk and you know, you
Yeah,
have different resources and different
yeah.
objectives.
Different resources completely, and different objectives completely. And in fact, the objectives probably change by the day depending on what he's working on. It's pretty crazy.
Yes, and he might care less about patents now if he's taking on some other governmental role or wherever that's leading right now.
Yeah, and patents don't apply on Mars, I guess. So it's only
I
only
have
on
had
Earth.
people come to me though and say, "Hey, we want to patent these types of technologies that will be applicable in outer space." It gets into an interesting conversation because you say, "Well, patents are jurisdictional.
Uh huh.
You can enforce them in the jurisdictions in which you get them. United States,
Hmm.
Australia, Europe, whatever it is." We don't have an interspace
Planetary. Yeah.
patent kind of, yeah, that
Yeah.
doesn't exist yet, but someday we might. I don't
Oh
know.
yeah. 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 It's almost like he knows something we don't know, and is part of building it. Um, but okay, that's great. I think that's very valuable. The golden egg thing really stuck out to me because I think a lot of companies are in that situation where you're a B2B software, SaaS tech, or even service, and you have some kind of unique competitive advantage that's allowing you to scale. That you have some kind of golden goose or golden egg that needs to be protected until you can either exit or be acquired, or you leverage it for more funding or whatever. So I think that's really what we're talking about. It's
It
very
really is,
important.
and it's just one more part of your overall business strategy, right? A lot of investors are like, I invest in teams, I don't invest in products. Totally fine, and,
Yeah.
and very true, right? Because the team is that that unique team and their qualities and characteristics and core values. That's one of your resources, so to speak, for your business strategy.
Hmm.
Patents might be one of your resources. Small businesses, oftentimes your branding, if you do it well, your branding might be predominantly the value driver of your entire business, right?
Yeah.
You have one trademark maybe for your name, and then you've developed this brand that people love and follow, and that's kind of represented by the trademark assets you
Hmm.
have. So when someone comes to buy your brand, they're like, well, I love that you're selling products and you have revenue, but I want access to your market is what I
Right.
want. And that's represented by the people who are loyal to you
That's right.
And none of us business owners want to admit it. They're probably more loyal to the brand we've created than they are to us as individuals, right?
Yeah.
So
Another one I've seen that I think is really interesting from the IP side is systems or processes. And I'm curious if you've come across any that have really stuck out to you about, patenting certain types of processes, both from the service side, probably less, probably more mechanical, or the software side.
yes, this is a man. You're asking all the tough questions here. Process it. So there's some history there, and maybe you know this and why you're asking it, maybe
Yeah.
not. There's some history there around what we call business method patents, right? Nobody that I know of uses that phrase anymore because it all kind of started back in the late 90s, early 2000s, and you heard about the Amazon one-click patent, and it was considered more of a business method patent.
Mm-hmm.
Might call it a software patent today, but because that term is easier to fit into what is patentable than business methods, which has a division of the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office, but if they're still doing it the same way, that division has informal instructions to never allow anything. So you don't want to be in that division. Um, so process wise, a lot of it comes down to, at least in the invention side of things, comes down to, are you transforming data or taking steps in a way that nobody's ever done it before, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so you have to kind of capture that, and then you have to place that inside of like a tangible thing, like, okay, we're transforming this data because it's tied to this memory module or this
Mm-hmm.
process or processing data. I think I'm going down a different path than what you meant to ask,
No,
but
then that's what.
what you
Yeah.
have to do to capture patent
Yeah.
protection on processes, and
Yeah.
it gets pretty nuanced, and that's where I spent working with IBM. I think probably for 10 or 15 years, maybe 50% of my practice was all around
Yeah.
technology enabled business practices,
Mm-hmm.
right? And the law has swung this way, and then it's swung this way, and we're somewhere in the middle right now, I think.
Yeah.
But
Yeah, I asked because I think that there are always these sort of shadows or dark places to find value in the market or in your business model, and I think that's something that some probably more sophisticated um, founders that they're in a technical type of business may want to look into, because they want to make, and it's probably going to be typically more in a bigger company like you were saying, IBM, because they have a lot more moving parts and they are able to have transparency across different departments and different how things move and talk to one another. But I think there are cases where you have someone that is bringing something new to market, and the actual product may not be uh, so new or reinventing, but the process of how they're taking it to market or how they actually get that service done is probably worth more. And you hear stories. I can't think of one off the top of my head, but I know there's a ton of stories where companies will have been bought not for the brand or for what their market share, but more for their systems and their processes, because
mhm.
they've been looked into to see, oh, if we add this to our bigger conglomerate, it's going to make us better as a company.
Yeah, they can sell more into their existing market. They might capture some new market. I think what you're getting at is, I had a conversation briefly on LinkedIn with a friend last week about, I think he called it edge theory, and I'm going to say, I'm going to I don't want to say for sure if that's what this is because I haven't studied edge
Yeah.
but innovation happens around the edges is really what we're
Mm-hmm.
getting at here, right? Those dark spaces or shadows, those are the edges of kind of the known world, and you start to get in. If you're a startup, you're looking for that edge
Mm-hmm.
usually, right? If you're going to innovate a dead center where Turo is already sitting, or where Google sit, like, you're never going to make progress. But if you get on the
Right.
edge there, Google buys up companies all the time because they've come in and they've created a tool or created an algorithm or done something
Right.
that's on the edge of what they're doing,
Mm-hmm.
and they're like, oh, let's bring you in, let's bring you
Mm-hmm.
in,
Mm-hmm.
and so if you're not on the edge, you're probably not innovative. If you're on
That's
the
right.
edge, you're probably taking some risks that other companies aren't. And
Yes.
one of the easy ways to do that is a lot of startups, even if they're not on the edge technologically, they're on the edge from a target market standpoint. So
Hmm.
they'll go and they'll be like, well, we're not going to go compete against this large healthcare company that does XYZ and provides these services and has done that for 80 years. Like we don't want to be there.
Yeah.
But if we go and look at this slice, it's probably a 2 or 3 million dollar initial niche market that we think we can sell into really, really easily, and maybe we'll figure out what to do after that, because two or
Right.
$3 million isn't enough to attract all the VC funding and all that stuff. But let's go after this really niche market right now,
Hmm.
and let's just, if you've read the book Nail It, Scale, let's nail that market.
Yeah.
These, or crossing the chasm, early adopters, like
Hmm.
like like let's get our beachhead clients in this niche,
Hmm.
and because it's on the edge, that market segment is on the edge of kind of
Completely.
the core that's already out there. So
Yeah.
technology, market, whatever it
Yep.
is, those edges are where startups operate.
Yeah, that's
So
it exactly. Yep. Yep. You hit that on the head. I think there's value to be had there for certain companies, and it's worth looking into if you fit that mold. The third one, as we kind of turn the corner here, is hiring and firing employees. So I know this can be, probably where your bread and butter is. I don't know. I'm just taking a guess, but I mean, I can see that companies by and large are going to have problems with hiring and firing employees. So, what would you say to companies that are facing that now or potentially going to have that problem?
yeah, first off, I'd say I'm sorry it's happening, because it's not fun for anybody, but
Right.
most people will go through this. And it's usually because of poor practices, poor documentation, not understanding what the rules are for small businesses. And I get it. You're trying to focus on building this cool thing. Everyone's excited about it. Everyone seems to be aligned. But once there's a shift and there's a misalignment, it causes drama, as I would call it. And drama doesn't help the business. Drama doesn't help
Nope.
any of the individuals, but everyone feels highly emotional about their position within that drama. And employment's just tough. I think that the market right now for employees and employers is pretty dynamic too, just given
Hmm.
some of the work from home or
Yeah, very
quiet
much.
quitting or whatever we're calling it today, right?
Hmm.
There's entitlement, whatever, right? There's just a lot of different expectations as to what working means.
Yeah.
And so I think this is a really easy thing to solve and even to avoid. Well, it's a lot easier to avoid it than to solve it. I should clarify that. Because if you have the right documents in place, you're going to minimize the amount of drama that happens, because the documents, as dumb as or as simple as it might sound, the documents set the expectations for everybody.
Yeah.
And when you have the documents, the state labor departments, you can show them you've got the documents. You can show them that you complied with the rules, and they're not going to hassle you. They're going to be like, well, you had your employee sign this document or provide these, or you have an employee handbook and it clearly states these things.
Hmm.
Now maybe they didn't read it or whatever, but like it's all there, and so you can rely on that. So whether if you're a startup, I would say you either want to talk to an attorney up front, just be like, hey, can you give me some simple template onboarding documents and maybe a little flow chart. What do I do with every employee that I hire?
Hmm.
Because if you follow that, you're going to avoid a ton of problems.
Yeah.
If the other option is to go to one of these, excuse me, HR/payroll type companies, right?
Hmm.
A lot of payroll companies will have an HR arm and they'll provide you a lot of documents.
Hmm.
Sometimes they're good, sometimes they're not, but they have systems where you can actually, if you spend the time doing it, you can kind of navigate these problems and avoid a lot of them.
Yeah.
What people do instead of that, instead of getting their documents in place through an attorney or through an HR company, they're excited. They're like telling their buddy about something, and their buddy says, "Oh, I was actually looking for something to work on." They're like, "Oh, come work with me.
Yeah.
We'll just pay you as a contractor for now, and then, we'll bring you as an employee later." And
Hmm.
they just kind of organically
Yeah.
build this team until there's drama, and then that's when we get called in and they're like, "Hey, you know, it was really clear. We agreed up front on XYZ. And I'm like, yeah, but you can't show that to anybody because it's not written down, right?
Right.
And people remember things differently, and we know people hear things differently. What you said, you might have said exactly like you said, but that's not what was heard,
Yep.
because somebody was excited about getting a job and heard that you promised to give them equity in your company someday, and instead they ended up getting fired over, something unrelated to their job. Like, it just turns into different things.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
What this sounds like to me is just a case of falling to the standard or the quality of your systems. And I think for a lot of, operational minded CEOs or founders, that's how I would be thinking about it, is not necessarily from a legal standpoint first, but from a systematic standpoint. Because if you do that, you're more likely to probably adopt these behaviors and put these systems in place, and then you're probably mitigating 80% of the issues you could have. And then maybe taking that system and putting it in front of someone like yourself and saying, hey, how good is this? Where are we missing the mark?
yeah, we do a lot of that. People come to us and they're, we either come in after things have fallen apart and we're like, well, let's fix your problem and put stuff in place going forward. Or
Yep.
they come to us before all of that and we say, well, and they're like, hey, can you either, draft us some, give us some templates, or look at the
Mm-hmm.
ones we've got and just tell us, are these good enough?
Mm-hmm.
Because that's what it is, right? It's a balance. Like, I get it. You're starting a business, you are wearing every hat in the company,
Yeah.
and there are a lot of them. And there are some that are really significant and some that have legal liabilities with them. And it's too much, right?
Right.
How and why any of us become entrepreneurs is sometimes baffling, but
That's right.
we must love the excitement and the chaos of it. I know I do. And so you have to also kind of make your this kind of comes back, I guess, to what we were saying in the beginning. As a first time founder, if you don't know how to judge, where that balance is, and you don't have that network around you to kind of get the advice as to where that
Mm-hmm.
balance should be for your business, it's a lot easier to think that you're making a good decision when in fact that's probably not the decision a lot of people would make if they had been through it, or if they were familiar with the potential risks.
Right.
So yeah,
Yeah.
but I like the idea of systems.
On this topic, before we wrap this, I wanted to just add this one nugget that I got from you in our pre-call, and we were talking about teams, and that is not, where people go wrong is not defining roles, kind of based on where they're headed, so that will end up in disputes. Could you maybe talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, I don't remember that comment exactly, but we have a lot of clients who will bring people in, you know, it's chaos. I mean, it
Yeah.
just really is, right?
Mm-hmm.
New company starting, launching everything, and so you get people who come in thinking that they are in one role, and that maybe that was the intention, but that changes, right? So
Right.
I've seen companies hire people, and somebody comes in at a lower level, we'll call it, and they move really quickly up into a higher level,
Mm-hmm.
and now maybe they were qualified for that, maybe they weren't,
Mm-hmm.
maybe they want more money for it because they feel like they're doing a more demanding job, maybe they're not getting the money. I think it comes back to the idea of expectations.
Yeah. And
People come in.
responsibilities, I mean, what I've seen is responsibilities, like you just said. I've seen that so many times where people come in, they take on more and more responsibility, but their pay hasn't really changed, and their role hasn't really changed in terms of how the company looks at them. And so then that's where they get into disputes, and good people leave because they feel undervalued when they've done all this work.
Yeah, and the other thing that happens sometimes is you bring somebody in maybe at too high of a level,
Mm-hmm.
and you start to see them perform or try to perform, and you're like, well, they can't really do that. And you hired your buddy, so
Yeah.
how do you fire your buddy? She's really good she's a really good friend, or he's a really
Yeah.
good person, but then you're like, well, let's just start taking away responsibilities from
Yeah.
them, and all of a sudden they realize one day, hey, I have an office and no responsibilities, like, and they might have been more excited about the opportunity to come in and work with you and grow a business than they
Uh-huh.
were about the specific salary they were getting or whatever. and
Yeah.
so and so you get this confusion, and people are like, well, what the heck, I thought I was a team member, I thought I was going to become a co-founder and have some
Mm-hmm.
equity, and you've actually diminish me into this role,
Yeah.
uh, instead of really elevating me to where what I heard was that I was on a different path.
Yeah.
So I think it really is, expectations are tough. And because companies are moving all the time, it's super dynamic. That's just the
Hmm.
startup world. It's chaos.
That's right.
Communication is key. You got to, you bring somebody in, you communicate with them when you're moving them up. Bring somebody in here and you need to move them down. You got to communicate with them. And when it's either maybe it's not a strong suit of some founders, or it's a fear, or maybe in some cases it really is just a lack of time and attention.
Yeah.
But lack of communication leads to more team issues, I think, than anything else.
100%. Well, hey, this has been awesome. Thanks for coming on. And we want to send people your way. So where can we send them?
Oh, thank you, Lee. It's been my pleasure to be here. I love talking with founders and hearing what they're working on and the chaos that they're dealing with. Sometimes it's chaos we can help fix.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's chaos we can just enjoy, and try to help avoid problems down the road. But yeah, I'm pretty accessible. I'm at two places. I'm on LinkedIn. I'm there quite a bit, maybe more than I should be, but I really enjoy seeing, again, the energy that's happening in the space. And so people can reach out to me on LinkedIn. I'm just Jeff Holman. If you look me up and you see somebody that looks a little bit like me and it says, I build fractional legal teams, that's me. You can't miss
There you
that.
go.
Reach out. The other place is through our law firm. Our website is set up so that people who might want to hire us can come in and they can set up a 30-minute free strategy call where
Perfect.
we'll hear what you're working on. We'll maybe do a little brainstorming around what the issues are that you know about, and maybe some that you don't know about, maybe some opportunities to think about other things. Usually people call us with one thing and they leave with three or
Yeah.
four
Right.
things. So we're really about kind of being educational on that call and say, hey, this is great. Here's how you proceed. Here are the steps for that thing you called about, and then as you grow, you're probably going to see this, and then you're going to see that, and maybe be prepared for these things to come up too. So it's a 30-minute call. You can get on our website. You can schedule a call, 30 minutes. We'll just chat and see if there's a good fit, see if there's something we can do to help out, and it's a fun way to meet people too.
I like it. That's great. Thanks, Jeff. This has been great.
Thank you so much, Lee.